All right, folks, headed home from CrossFit. I'm going to go to Reddit here for a question after I clear out these windows so I can see. It's an interesting one, I think. It's time to beep. No, I think it's a good one for people that are getting into the industry. Probably a question that if you're not asking yourself, you'll probably be either noticing or be curious about pretty shortly after starting. So the question is regarding coding at university versus like coding at work. Like, so once you start your job, and really how different is it? And like I said, I think this is a good one for people to think about. I honestly, it's been a while for me since I was in university, so I had internships, so I don't know for other people that kind of went through college or university without working internships or jobs doing programming, like how much they think about this, or if they just expect that what they're doing in school is going to be the exact same. So that'd be good to talk about. If you have questions you want to answer, just leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to try and answer them for you. And if you have something that's more specific or you want to keep anonymous, just send me a message. This person's about to run a red light with their lights off. Amazing. Also, I am contemplating getting a 360 camera so that for situations like that, I can show you guys. But the issue is that I am basically doing all of these videos in a way that doesn't take me any extra time, because my main YouTube channel, I put out 3 videos a week. And with this channel together, I do about 12 to 15 videos in total. I pay an editor for the other channel. I lose hundreds of dollars every month doing that, and I'm not ready to to sort of double that, to be completely honest with you. So I'm thinking about it because I think it would be really fun. But I need to find channel sponsors or something if I'm going to be doing that, because I need to pay for an editor. I don't have time to go stitch together videos like that, but I think it would be super cool. Okay. How different is it? It's pretty different. I think a lot of the time, the way that I think back to university stuff was a lot more, and I should preface this, your mileage will vary. Just because this is my experience, I'm not saying this is going to be everyone's experience, but I personally found that a lot of stuff in university was so much focused on like a theoretical concept. So we would be learning about data structures and algorithms, and you would have to go make a program that is essentially like exercising the fact that you know how to go implement one of these things. So the problem with this is that, or okay, let me start the other way. I don't want to say the problem with it. The goal that they're trying to get you to do is think about a concept, right? They're trying to give you some other way of thinking about the algorithm, because if they present it to you in class and they kind of walk through either why a data structure is effective in terms of like storage or performance costs, or they're showing you an algorithm, like here's a graph traversal algorithm, here's why it's optimal. When they try to give you homework on it, generally I find the idea is like, it's just to reinforce the concept. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's, I think, how a lot of homework works. Here's the theory behind it. Here's like maybe some examples. But in order to solidify it, we're going to get you to be hands-on. And basically, in order to go make it yourself, you have to have some level of understanding of it. Not only that, again, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I feel like it's another modality of learning it, right? So if someone's talk to you about it, you're getting like this auditory part, they're showing you visuals of it working, you get this visual part, and now they're going to say go build it, so you get the hands-on part. And all of these are different ways to try and reinforce how to learn a concept. So this is, I don't want to say great, but I think that this is absolutely a way that we learn things, especially in school and university or college. Now, on top of that, I'm not saying that that's the only types of projects and stuff you get, but I found that I either had classes like that, where our projects would look like that, or if we had group projects, I felt like the intention was that they are teaching us how software is built in the industry. That's what I felt. But after having been in the industry for a while, it kind of seemed like it was also exercising other parts of, I don't know, like engineering in general. And I'll explain what I mean by that, because I didn't go for computer science, I went for computer engineering. I went to the University of Waterloo, which is known to be a good engineering school in Canada. And in my opinion, they focus a lot on, like even within computer engineering or any engineering field there, they focus on like teaching you engineering concepts like ethics and analysis are two that really stand out to me. So I actually felt like when we had group projects, it wasn't to like teach us how software is built in the industry. It was, again, this reinforcing idea to try and teach us how, to teach us about like, how do you do an analysis? Because the project itself might be very basic, but they're trying to get you to compare and contrast things so that you have to do a write-up in addition and explain, like, we chose this path because X, Y, or Z. I have to switch lanes here because this person's going 10 miles an hour under the limit. I don't understand people. Okay, so that, like, in general was most of my university experience, which was like either reinforcing concepts or felt like trying to address general engineering practices, which you might argue, oh, well, shouldn't that be like actual work experience? And like, kind of, but also not really. Because again, the scenarios were kind of contrived. I mean, it's I feel like a lot of the time it's going to be that way for school assignments, but the work itself wasn't set up in a way that was very much like the real world. So I think those were the goals that they were trying to accomplish, or at least in hindsight, that's how it felt. Now, to kind of go back to what I was saying near the beginning, like what's good and bad about that or different, is that I think what's not reinforced in school, at least for me, was that when you're working somewhere, it's a business. Fundamentally, everything that you're doing there is about operating a business. And I think a lot of people miss this and they build resentment because of it, because they're saying, well, that's not how we write good code, or that's not this about software development or that. And I understand, like, it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, we have to remember this. You literally work for a business, and the business is not code. Okay, so your job involves writing code, absolutely, but the business is not just code. The business is being able to ship value to customers so that customers will pay money. At the end of the day, that is fundamentally what's happening. And I do think that this often gets missed. You absolute moron. I cannot, this is again, need a 360 camera. Someone just tried to switch lanes into me with no signal. I watched it happen, like, I knew it was gonna happen. I had to stop, I had enough time to think about the curse words I wanted to use and then not say them because I didn't want it to be recorded. Oh my God. Okay, the point that I'm trying to get across here is that it can feel very frustrating, because if you are going through school and learning about software development concepts and you're learning about data structures and algorithms, and you're seeing like what a clean slate of all these things looks like, and then you get into the real world of building software, you often have this rude awakening, like, why isn't the code base perfect? Why does it feel like we have to do these things that we're being asked to do? And a lot of the time, or like, why don't we get time for addressing tech debt and things like that? Like, this code base is terrible. They keep asking us to do things. It's because at the end of the day, it's about trying to ship value to customers, because if customers are not paying you money, the company will cease to exist. That's the reality of it. And then I think what I would recommend is working backwards from that. It's not we need to write code. How do we get money for this? It's the other way around. And I think, and I know like this sounds kind of harsh, but I'm saying it this way on purpose because I want it to stand out to you. I think if you reverse this thinking, right? Customers want to pay us money. Sorry, customers want value, and they are willing to pay money for that value. How do we get them that value? Because what ends up happening is that, like I said, people get frustrated about tech debt, and there's pressure for deadlines and things like that. But if you understand that customers are paying for value to be delivered, then you can start to have more effective conversations with other people that are prioritizing things. So I'll come back to that in just a moment. One of the biggest discrepancies I see is, number one, this sort of dichotomy between, I was in school and I'm trying to, I need to get graded on my assignment, so I need to write what looks like perfect code. From whatever lens you happen to have on that. But the reality is, when it comes to the real world, and in general, you'll learn that there's no such thing as what perfect code is. So there is diminishing returns at some point when you're trying to refactor and clean things up and make things perfect. At some point, you're just spending time doing stuff that has almost little to no return. Now, I'm not saying refactoring and cleaning up code doesn't have value. I'm saying what I've noticed is that sometimes individuals that are fresh out of school and really have this mindset around computer science, writing like what good code looks like from their understanding, is they spend a disproportionate amount of time trying to write code that they feel like is perfect. But it's like, in reality, we have to balance other things. Like, there are constraints, like time. Time is a resource that we have constraints on. If given unlimited time, you could write better and better code, but at some point, again, diminishing returns for doing so. Now, I know some people are probably frustrated about what I said earlier, and they're already going to be missing some of the points I'm trying to make here. I'm not saying don't test your code. I'm not saying go ahead and write crappy code on purpose. That's not the point. What I'm saying is, I often see that sometimes people that are missing this mindset around we have to ship value to customers, they spend a disproportionate amount of time the other way. And then they get frustrated because they don't understand why they can't have more time to write what they believe is perfect code. Now, I should add in, because if you're well, who is this jerk that gets to talk to us like that? I just looked him up. Isn't he some manager at Microsoft? Obviously, he's going to have this opinion. Okay. To back up, I was a software engineering manager and software developer simultaneously at a startup for 8 years. From essentially the beginning of that startup, really once they started to build out their engineering team. I'm telling you this because from working at a startup that ended up being very successful, unfortunately after I left, I got the worst timing in the world, I guess. The reality is that you need to be focused on this kind of stuff. If you had a whole team of developers that was just focused on trying to write perfect code and spending too long on it, you might not end up shipping things in a timely fashion. Another person without their lights on. And the result of that for a startup can be devastating. Truly, if you're in at an early startup, when you need to be finding customers so that you can make money, it makes a big difference. So that's the sort of the second part to this first point. My numbering is a little off, which is I think that sometimes people don't realize, because it is a business, you are part of getting the customer base and stuff, right? It's sometimes, this is maybe more from a startup versus large company perspective, but what's a good way to phrase this? the work that you're doing should be direct, like an earlier stage company. The work that you're doing is going to directly have an impact on being able to get customers or retain customers. And I think sometimes, especially as if you're, like, say, someone who came from college or university and you're joining a larger company, this is the point I'm trying to get at, sorry. You may find that if you missed out on this part of a company's growth where you're like, how do we get the customer? How do we keep the customer? And like kind of going through that struggle, you almost take it for granted. Right? Like, you didn't get to live through, and like it could be, thankfully you didn't have to live through this period where the company's trying to do anything to get customers and keep them so that they can stay afloat. And sometimes I think that when you miss out on this, like I said, you take it for granted and then it becomes frustrating. So the whole meta point around this first aspect was that if you're misunderstanding that, you really have to be thinking about how we ship value to customers, I think you may find like it's a bit of a rude awakening when you go to develop software at a company versus like a school. And that's because of real constraints and the fact that you need to be focused on getting value to customers. Now, the second part that I wanted to talk about, my mouth is getting super dry now. The second part I wanted to talk about is like how much time you spend doing what I would call like maintenance work, I guess, or working with legacy code. In school, and this is like, again, just when I was talking about how school projects work, every school project you do is basically like, hey, go build something new. Every single time. Every single time you get to go build something new. And then what happens when you go to work? They're like, here's an existing code base. It's 15 years old. For some people, that's most of their life when they start their first job. And someone's like, hey, dive in, start working in here. And it can catch you really off guard because you're not used to that. All of your programming experience has been, I need you to go build from scratch this thing. So you're like, okay, like how do I go do that? You go pull some pieces together, start it up. But now you're going to be told you have this code base that exists that's a monster. And, go dive in, go start fixing bugs, go change up this feature. And not only is it like overwhelming because you have a code base to navigate, and you're not used to that. By the way, I do have videos on my main channel called Dev Leader about like navigating code bases if you're new, so you could check that out if you're interested. I think probably if you search like code base on Dev Leader, you'll find at least one video on it. So not only is it how to navigate that, but the type of work you're doing is going to be very different. Because often, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, right? You might very well be working at a place where you're a new developer and they're like, hey, we're building something new from scratch. I'm not saying it's impossible, but a lot of us spend a disproportionate amount of time in existing code bases. And to you, and to many people, if you came into a team with a code base that's already a few years old, that's already the legacy code. Right? You're there maintaining it. You're there, adding more functionality to it, but it's certainly not like a greenfield project where you're just starting from scratch. So I don't have stats on it to back up what I'm saying, but I'm sure if you're curious, I'm sure you could go search this online and there's probably some data on it. But a disproportionate amount of time spent in existing legacy code bases. Now, if you hate that kind of thing, I'm sure you could structure your career and how you're focused on job opportunities to work around that. But as much as like people don't like working in legacy code because it's old and it's boring or whatever, I think you end up having some of the most like unique engineering challenges this way. When you start something brand new, you have so many options. You have far fewer constraints than when you have something that already exists and someone says, well, you already have this existing service. There's already, hundreds, thousands, millions of people using it. Now, go make a change to it. And by the way, don't disrupt anyone. Like, that has some unique constraints. And I think that's where, like, you might not love the, you're like, oh, the code base is old, or it's like spaghetti, it's brittle, or it needs more tests. And like, that's all, sure, that's, we're going to have our whole careers to complain about that. But when you're working in existing code bases with, live users, if it's a live service or, a product that's shipped to people, even like an app or whatever, right? Like there's going to be backwards compatibility, like with, if it's making requests to your servers and stuff like that. There's so many interesting challenges that you have as an engineer when you have to work in existing code bases. So, to answer it in a succinct way, I would say it's very different, college or university compared to the real world. And it's just because I think in university or college, there's focus on let's reinforce the concept. And in the real world, it's not let's reinforce a concept, it's how do we ship value to customers. And it's I'm just thinking about some of the people that have probably watched this, or the comments they want to leave, or if they're going to thumbs down it because they're frustrated. Like, when I'm telling you that a business is about shipping value to customers, it's almost like it's not an opinion. I'm not saying this is my opinion on what a business is. I'm telling you that's what a business is. Now, again, if you were triggered by what I said and you're still watching this at the end, my goal is, again, not to tell you that in the real world all we do is write crappy code. The reason I'm telling you this is that if you understand that that's the goal of the business, then you can approach writing software in a way that, going forward will hopefully make that feel less frustrating for you. So if you find, oh my goodness, we're spending so much time in these areas because no one wrote tests, this is a nightmare, make sure as you're going forward, you are adding the tests in. That becomes part of how you're estimating or forecasting the amount of work. So again, I'm telling you this because if those are things you value and you think and believe that they will help make writing software in the future more effective for your team to make the code base better, do that. I'm just telling you that that's why you're getting this weird pressure or this friction to not go address tech debt. It's because at the time you might say, I don't like how that code looks. And if someone who gets to prioritize things says, I don't care what it looks like, is it working? And you're like, yeah, they're going to say, great, then people are paying for it. Like, basically shut up and keep moving. But if you have a good reason to be able to say, hey, look, if we address this tech debt, this will allow us to move more effectively in this area of the code, because that's where we're continuing to add more features, or we're spending so much time fixing bugs here, like a disproportionate amount of time. We need to add tests, we need to refactor it, we need to clean it up. Make a business case for it. It's not like no one who's working in product management or in sales is going to understand that like the code is ugly or that you don't like it. It's the wrong messaging to them. That might be how you perceive it, but if you want to have an effective way to message this, explain how it's going to have a business impact, and you'll have a lot more success. Anyway, that's it for this one. Hopefully you didn't hate the video too much, but I'll see you next time. Take care.